Good morning, everyone. It's Bo Kitty from Reality Check Yourself here, and I am making a podcast today about risk and reward and what that looks like and how that can manifest in our lives and what the spectrum of being comfortable with risk is. Because, one of my favorite mottos, you know how when, you send your kids out into the street and everyone says, be careful. I've always sort of examined that because I'm not sure that, I know that long lives are achieved by being careful, but I'm not sure that a lot of other amazing stuff is achieved by simply being careful. So I made a deck of tarot cards for business called the Power Up deck, and they're currently in production to be an app so they can reach a wider global market. And one of the cards is take lots of risks today, kids. And this is something I adopted quite a few years ago, probably 15 years ago. I started saying take lots of risks. And it was funny, I even had one of those dorky little plastic signs in the back of my Subaru station wagon that said, I love risk. And I remember I had an accident, actually. I got T-boned, which was actually my fault, at slow speed trying to park. And I remember posing for a photo in front of the T-boned car with this I love risk sticker, because I'm aware that I love a certain amount of risk, right? But that's me personally from doing a lot of soul searching and questing in that area. So I'll tell you some risks that I used to take that I've changed that didn't really pay off. So I have no idea why, but in my 20s, I used to hate wearing a seatbelt. I know that's absolutely stupid, right? So luckily, I never had a car accident during that time that was at any sort of speed to warrant changing that for me. But what actually changed it was getting fined 3 or 4 times for not wearing a seatbelt and losing my license due to demerit points for a few months. So that changed that pretty quickly. And also I grew out of my rebellious 20s and realized that seatbelts actually will save my life. And I don't know, what was I doing? Having a little revolution of one in my car? I don't know. But anyway, now I wear my seatbelt all the time. And I also have one of those annoying cars that beeps at me if I don't. So anyway, that is a risk that I no longer take. I must admit, I ride my bike every day and I do not wear a helmet, but I only ride in the park. So there's a park behind my house with lots of big concrete paths. And I ride there at pretty slow speeds with my dog every day, and I don't wear a helmet. So that's a calculated risk that I choose to take. So why am I talking about all these seatbelts and helmets and possibly contributing to the road toll number? Well, it's because in business, you need to work out where on that spectrum of comfortable risk-taking you are. So probably about, what year was that? 2012, I bought my first investment property. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'd researched property for years. And I knew that I was leaving my salary job and I was going to start freelancing. And so for me, it was like, all right, it's time to borrow some money while I've got this salary. So anyway, I met these guys. They were sort of finance advisor type people. And one of the most useful things that I did with them was that they got me to answer a whole lot of questions about my comfortability with levels of risk. And so how much of a gambler was I, basically? So what's so interesting is, for all this not wearing seatbelts in my younger years and things like that, I don't, for example, gamble. Gambling is not really something that appeals to me and never really has. So there is definitely a spectrum of risk, and everyone is somewhere along it, basically. And I think that where you are on it has a lot to do with other things in your life. So for example, a lot of it has to do with your upbringing. If you always had a really stable and supportive family who would help you out with things, then that's going to mean that you're more comfortable probably taking some more risks because you know that you have that safety network to catch you if you fall. If you've been like me, I was out on my own at 16, never really had any family support, and, have been pretty independent most of my life. So I'll still take risks, but I probably take more calculated risks than someone who has a whole big family that's always backed them up and bailed them out. And another reason why we really need to look at the spectrum of risk and where we sit on it is with these sort of bold moves in business and also in your careers. Like everybody knows that when you're going to do a job transition, some people are perfectly content with quitting a job and not knowing what they're going to next. Other people literally need that other job lined up so that they can just hop from one to the other. The problem is that some people get so paralyzed with fear about that change and about it not working out to their benefit that they actually get stuck. They get stuck staying in the job they hate, and that risk of a leap, of a jump, of doing something different is too terrifying. And that's what I really want to try and help people to acknowledge and work out and understand where that fear is coming from, why, and hopefully be able to smash it, because when we get stuck in a situation where we can't move forward, it's usually fear. And it's usually fear at either something that's happened in the past or something that we think is going to happen in the future. Because if we look at the now, very often in those situations, the now is not good. We are not happy, we are not fulfilled, we're not learning anything, And so anyway, with these financial advisors, they got me to answer these questions about where and the level of risk comfortability that I was. And it's funny because I have conversations these days about people with cryptocurrency, and you can see within the first 30 seconds of that conversation how comfortable they are with risk. Their eyes either light up at the idea of something being a bit risky and a bit unknown, or they straight away shut down, and they shut down the ideas as well. Now, I am not a believer in cryptocurrency. I'm still 100% Switzerland on the fence. I do have some money invested in there, but it's only what I am willing to lose. I haven't put my life savings in there. I've just put enough in there so that it might do something exciting one day. And for now, I've acknowledged it's $2,500 what I've got in there. So I've gone $2,500. That's a chunk that could be enough to make something. But also, if I lose it, it's not going to drastically impact my life negatively, And so that's a level of risk that I'm comfortable with. The other way that I would love to talk about risk and how it, we really need to identify where we are on this spectrum of comfortability is in those transition times and in that long-term planning stuff. Because it's funny, I heard some friends say that they made a 25-year plan the other day. I almost laughed because I don't know about you all, but 25 years on this planet where it currently is at the moment, the entire workforce, the entire fabric of society is going to be different. We're going to have, we could even have AI overlords by then, and that is not me being a conspiracy theorist. So 25-year plans are great and everything, but have you ever heard that saying that, I can't remember what it is, but it's something about how basically you can make all the plans that you want, but the universe or God is probably going to step in and make some other plans for you. So I just sort of feel like when we do these big life dreams and plans and goals, and when we're looking to switch careers, finding out how comfortable we are with that risk, really acknowledging, after the last few years, I'm well aware that I do calculated risks. So I don't just throw all my beans in a basket. I don't just jump off the cliff. I make sure that I'm still going to jump off the cliff, but I'm going to make sure that I've got all the right harnesses in place and And the way in which you live your life can also reflect where you are on that spectrum. So when it comes to adventure things, I am a scuba diver, so I'll scuba dive pretty much anyone, anywhere. But I always make sure that the gear is well looked after, that the people are speaking to me well. And in fact, I went to dive a shipwreck off the coast of Bali, and I didn't really get a good vibe from the dive school when I turned up, but I'd traveled for hours to get there, and I'd planned 2 days of diving. I'd paid for all this diving ahead of time, so I was going to give it a go. Anyway, the very first dive, my air in my tank was tainted. I can't remember what happened, but basically that's right. I told him also that I was out of air. I was ready to surface and do a safety stop, and they took me further into the wreck, and I ended up running out of air. Now, I'm quite a qualified diver, so if I was on my own, I would have just gone off and do my own thing. But when you're with a group in a school, it can be a bit harder to do that, and there can be some sort of obligation to stay with a group. So anyway, I told them that was really dangerous and I'm not doing any more diving, and they fought me, and I nearly caved. But at the end of the day, it was like, I'm in another country by myself. I am not going to put myself in a situation, I've done over 150 dives, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I feel like my personal safety is threatened. It's not worth it for me to see a shipwreck. So, but the thing is, I knew that so deeply that it meant that I had to really voice my concerns to get my money back. And I did. I ended up getting my money back. And they said, you won't get transport to the main part where you're going to the city. You won't get it for 2 days. And so they tell me that, and I calculated that risk, and I went, you know what? I'm pretty resourceful. It's just me. I'm going to wing it. And lo and behold, excuse me, I actually hitchhiked in Bali with a truck, and I got home later that afternoon. So it did take me a day to get back, but I felt nothing but good about that choice. I pulled out of that risk and calculated the benefit over the loss and what was more worth it for me. Another time when my comfortability with risk and trying to come up with tools to sort of work through that stuff came up was when I left that salary job in, I think, end of 2011. So end of 2011, I gave my notice, and I'll be honest, I didn't have anything to go to. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I'd totally hit the glass ceiling of a certain industry. Like, there was literally nowhere for me to go in the town I was in that I didn't want to leave. So I did this thing called What's the Worst That Can Happen? It's a great little exercise. If you're feeling that sort of stuckness, or you have to make a move, but you're just not sure, if you can make the move without having all those other things in place. And so What's the Worst That Can Happen is an exercise where you start with the initial problem that you're stuck on. And so for me, it was leaving my cushy, but also kind of boring salary job, and this is the thing. To a lot of people out there, it won't sound boring. I used to book nightclubs, but for me at that time, I'd done it for 6 years, and I'd booked 2 of the best clubs in the city in Melbourne, and the shine had kind of worn off. At first I thought I was creating these magical, amazing events with people, and by the end it really came down to, was I selling enough alcohol? And when I realized that had become the main motivation, I realized it wasn't fulfilling me anymore. Having said that, some of the people I worked with in those years are still my dear friends to this day, and I really learned a lot and I had a great time. So that was all an amazing opportunity, and I have no regrets, but it was definitely time to start looking for something else. And I also had this niggly little voice telling me that I needed to create something of my own, that, if we're going to work like demons, and if we're the kind of people that really emotionally own the work that they do, which is what I do, then you really need to be crafting something that is yours, that you get to keep, that you get to nurture, that you get to honor. I see a lot of people who put all their energy and resources and talent and skill into other people's dreams, other people's projects. They make amazing things happen and lots of money for other people. Now, that is something you need to look at on that spectrum of risk as well, because I get to make all those things for myself and my own business now, but that freedom is balanced with the uncertainty of not knowing if I'm going to get a client this week, of not knowing if this business is going to last 2, 3, 4 years into the future. You know, I mean, you don't really know that with an employer either. You don't know if tomorrow you could get retrenched. And so I guess there is a lot more freedom, in fact, in running your own thing, as long as you've got the discipline. You know, and that's the thing, is the discipline is something, it's a muscle that you flex. Every day you've got to get up and do it better and keep going. And a lot of people just don't have the self-discipline or the drive and motivation to do that. Okay, so back to 2012. I'm at the salary job. I know I'm leaving, and I was scared. I was really scared. And I'd booked a trip, I think, to Thailand to go diving. And yeah, I think I was coming back to do some training after that, but basically I was out, you know. And I found out this exercise called What's the Worst Can Happen? And so basically what it is you start with the initial fear. So leaving my job equals what's the worst that can happen? So I wrote all those lists down, and it was things like I won't have a salary, obviously. And then you do what's the worst that can happen when you don't have a salary. And so you write all the lists for that. I won't have money for food. I, won't be able to pay my rent, or whatever it is. And then you work out what's the worst that can happen with that. And it was like, well, I could end up on the streets. I could I could have to sell all my possessions or whatever. Anyway, basically you keep going and you go really deep. And whatever your answer is, you say, okay, and that happens, and what's the worst that could happen? Anyway, I got to the end of this exercise, and it was like an A4 page or something. And what's the worst that could happen was literally being eaten by a shark in Thailand. And it was like, well, that is very unlikely to happen. And basically, as you go and extrapolate all these fears that you have, it kind of brings them to the light. I think a lot of time our fear is this like nebulous thing. It's just this like sort of can't or won't or wouldn't, like hovering this black cloud. And I think that often we don't actually define what the actual fear is. What is the actual machinations of that fear? What would it look like? What would it manifest in your life? So I have often set what's the worst that could happen as an exercise for clients. And it's almost like we give our fear so much weight, like it controls us. It controls our movements, our actions, our thoughts, the way we relate to people. And so when you actually pull that fear out, give it a face, give it a name, write it down, give it some parameters, it's only then that you realize how ridiculous is being eaten by a shark in Thailand as a result of quitting your salary job. Like, this is how irrational fear is. So anyway, I did that exercise and I gave my notice. And funnily enough, I did have a new sort of career branch lined up. I was going to be a TAFE teacher. And off I went to TAFE. And, that actually only lasted 6 months. And I realized that wasn't the right branch for me. In TAFE teaching, there wasn't enough risk. I was literally just regurgitating other people's curriculum about stuff that I was still doing in the real world. And it just wasn't relevant for me. So what's the worst that can happen is a really great exercise. Another thing I'd like to sort of leave you with is the idea that fear is bad. Like when we're standing at the edge of a pool and we're about to dive in, off a diving board especially, and there is that, that feeling, it's sort of rises from the gut of your stomach, and it sort of comes up into the top of your stomach. And then, this is where we sort of feel like there's butterflies in your throat. It kind of moves up through the body. And it's almost like the gut instinct is, going upside down into a body of water is a nervous, it's a scary idea, and it goes up and it goes up. And then eventually that feeling hits our brain. And that's the point when we get really excited. And I always say, excitement and fear, same thing. Absolutely the same thing. So why not just feel that and do it anyway? That excitement is the whole point. Yeah, you're scared. So do it. Great. You're scared. I don't know. I just feel like it's not often enough that we allow scared to be useful. Fear propels us towards the unknown. It can also make us run from the unknown or freeze, fight, flight, or freeze. I mean, that's what we do when we are faced with fear. And I think that knowing where you are on that risk spectrum, so being aware that you are where you are in that spectrum, and every person is different, and also where you are on that spectrum will change throughout your life. I mean, if you have kids, you will suddenly move down the spectrum because you are now responsible for some other lives. When you're on your own and you're single, you're going to take way more risks, financial risks, physical risks, probably risks with your health. And then, when you have children, you become a bit older, maybe you have other things in your life, such as mortgages and things, which means that a lot of that risk changes for you. And I just think it's really important to continually reassess where you are on that spectrum. The other thing is, I used to tell people, quit your job, everyone freelance. That was my line when I first started this job, because that's what I was doing, this business. But over the last few years, I've realized that is really not for everyone. In fact, it's not for most of us. What we need to do is, before we're leaving a 9-to-5 job, is we need to sort of work out where we are on that risk spectrum, and then we need to put in place some parameters that we're comfortable with. So I've had a couple clients recently actually ring me up a year later and go, "Oh, Bo, I just wanted to give you an update. I've taken a real job." And it's so funny. They kind of pause and wait. They pause and wait for me to kind of, get disappointed or berate them. But I just don't, that's not where I'm coming from. I'm never, getting a real job is actually an amazing outcome, because sometimes people come to me with their business idea or their freelance thing that they kind of haven't really devoted themselves to. And then I tell them, okay, well, if you really want to make this your main hustle, you're going to have to do this, 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 and this. And I set them a list. And honestly, sometimes just the setting of that list, the actual confrontation about what they need to do to push it forward, is enough to get them turning the other way. Now, if in one session I can get you to recognize that business that you've been half-assed talking about for 5 years is not actually the thing you want to do full-time, then I'd say that that's pretty successful. But I just think, the idea of just doing art or just doing music or even just doing teaching or just doing a 9-to-5 job is not fulfilling and sustainable in the long run. If you're doing that 9-to-5 job that you don't really like but you're comfortable in, then please do something creative on that time off that you have. You've got to honor the other parts of yourself. You can't just do work. And that goes for creative people too. If your creative hustle is your full-time gig and you work on it 100 hours a week like I do and you love it, that's great. But you need to work out another way to make money when it's quiet time so that you can just get some dollars coming in. You need to work out other ways to have parts of your creativity not be monetized so that you don't lose the joy. And if you need to go and take a JOB, that's what I call them, JOBs. If you need to take a JOB now and then or in winter, then do it. There's nothing wrong with that. I think we really get stuck in binaries these days, risk versus safety and employed versus contractor, freelance, and I just think it doesn't have to be that black and white. So anyway, that is my little morning wrap on risk and rewards. And I really think when you're thinking about these things, think of the spectrum. Picture a spectrum, even a rainbow spectrum. And you just decide where you are on that spectrum at the time. And maybe that will help inform your decision. So I hope everyone has a great day. This is episode number 2. But I am definitely going to be making some more of these. So please subscribe to the podcast, give it a share on your socials, and look forward to talking more to you soon. All right, have a great day, everyone. Bye.